Jam-packed East Coast bias for our friends here at FanDuel TV, of course, on the Ringer Gambling Show, as we have hit a wonderful, wonderful time in the sports calendar as I welcome into Triple Threat. Raheem Palmer, Joe House, John Jastremski. We have a ton of NFL free agency news and nuggets to get to. What teams moved the needle, quarterback carousel, everything that comes with the NFL and them taking over the middle of March. We'll get to the final few days of the conference tournaments, trying to figure out, hey, Duke or Auburn of the field. We'll have the field of 68 next week at this time on this particular show. You're going to have all the round of 64 games to bet from Raheem, House, myself, the bundle, you name it. But we begin, gentlemen, with the game on Wednesday night. We waited to do our open tonight because Oklahoma City and Boston went to battle. You have the premier team in the West, the premier team in the East, despite Cleveland's record. House, the game did not disappoint. SGA was brilliant. Tatum was brilliant. The Celtics shot a zillion threes. But the toughness, the intestinal fortitude of the Oklahoma City Thunder, big minutes from Chet Holmgren, they pull away late. That is a big boy win at Boston. What do you say, big boy?
Yeah, going into Boston, and really to me, it was the poise down the stretch. And for my money, the difference really was Chet Holmgren. He played the most minutes since he's come back from injury, took the most threes, had the most threes made, most points since he came back from injury, 15 rebounds, and his toughness inside. Chet Holmgren tough. That's kind of an oxymoron, but I just thought they created an inside-outside kind of game down the stretch. I mean, I've been skeptical about them in the half-court ending games. The other thing you have to acknowledge is that Boston shot the three poorly, especially in the second half. They shot under 20% from three in their own gym in a referendum game. I mean, if we're lucky enough to get this matchup, Dream, in the NBA Finals, let's have 7 of these. OKC did what it does, which is get to the free throw line. They made enough of the free throws. The difference was the made free throws by OKC, the missed threes by Boston, but the matchup is so rich.
Yeah, I think, House, you hit the nail on the head. And obviously, the Celtics were 20 of 63, 31% from behind the arc. But the biggest thing is that Jaylen Brown didn't play well at all. I mean, 5 for 15 from the field, 0 of 5 from 3. But more importantly, Oklahoma City got him in foul trouble. I mean, he fouled out of the game. Derek White also fouled out of the game as well. And a lot of times when you're getting to the line and you're getting guys in foul trouble, you're getting guys out of rhythm. And that's the one thing that SGA really does well. 10 for 11 from the line. At the end of the day, this Oklahoma City Thunder team, we do have questions about them in the half court. But in the postseason, if you can get to the line and you can get the opposing team in foul trouble, you always have opportunities to win. So I think Oklahoma City is rightfully the favorite in the Western Conference.
So, Raheem, I want to get back to Oklahoma City, but from a Boston standpoint, Jaylen Brown, you mentioned it, he fouls out of this game. He was not at his very best. You got a really good game out of Jason Tatum. But in general, is that the blueprint, you think, for Boston not winning an NBA title this year? A game like we saw, and you have that over a couple of games of a playoff series where, simply put, they're not knocking down the outside shot. Because you look at this game, I mean, the Celtics got to the line 12 times in this game. That's it. They only went to the charity stripe 12 times. Is that how you see Boston? If indeed they don't repeat, they don't win an NBA championship, is it about not being able to hit the three-point shot consistently?
It's definitely about not being able to hit the three-point shot consistently. It's also about turnovers, and it's also about their offense getting stagnant. I mean, we've seen that in the past in the Brown and Tatum era. So I think there's lots of ways that they could, lose this, especially when you consider that there's another team in the Eastern Conference who is just as good and arguably better than the Boston Celtics this year.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, and this game really put a spotlight on it, is there are teams that have a size advantage over Boston. And Oklahoma City had a size advantage. If you take the combined free throws of Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, they went 7 for 11 from the line to go along with the 10 out of 11 from SGA. So, because the reason that Jaylen that Brown and White fouled out is because they had to guard them big guys. The Celtics don't have Besides, Cornette was out there, but that's not a guy that's good. You can count on for the minutes to shut down those bigs. You know, you got 34 minutes out of Horford. That man was doing all that he could, 6 for 12 from the field. But I think, you know, OKC sides advantage, and the same is true of Cleveland, to Dream's point, JJ.
Yeah, and the common theme between Cleveland and Oklahoma City, House, you mentioned Hartenstein, who I absolutely love, and I miss his toughness and his swagger. He had that mask he was rocking tonight. We looked like freaking Robin in the Adam West movies, but it worked for him. More power to you. You had him and Holmgren playing alongside one another, and Cleveland would have that dynamic, of course, with Mobley and with Jared Allen. And I know Porzingis has been up and down. He's dealing with the illness and everything that comes with it. This is the sort of game where it's like, wow, you play those two bigs and Holmgren could take it to the outside, or if Mobley's in outside shots, he could take it to the outside. That gave Boston fits. That's a great point. I think we're going to see more teams do that. The key is, do teams have the bigs that can make you stretch and do the dirty work and hit the free throws? Tough to have guys like Holmgren and Hartenstein and Mobley and Allen, for that matter, you know?
There's only a couple of those teams out there, but they're the ones that Boston's got to get through if they want to defend this title dream.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. But I mean, I think this is a 2-horse race in the East. I think Boston won't shoot this poorly against everybody. So I think ultimately they'll be fine. But, you know, if you look at the Boston Celtics at home, they are just 15-19 against the spread at home. So for whatever reason, this team is not covering numbers at home. And, you know, it seems like the market has caught up to this team. So even in the playoffs, if they're winning games, maybe you got to look to fade this team at home.
Well, and that's a great point, Raheem, on the Celtics, who had this home juju last year in the regular season specifically, where they were unbeatable. This year, ATS House, you know, you're the defending champs. I think you're going to have a lot of games where Boston's playing. If you look from basically October until now, a whole lot of inflated lines. Now, you didn't have that in this Oklahoma City game tonight because you have one of the big boys of the league coming in. But it just goes to show you, just because you're going to be one of the 3 best teams in a sport doesn't mean you're going to go and cover week in and week out. I mean, we see it with the Chiefs. Now you're seeing it with the Celtics to a different degree.
Yeah, the market on this game was interesting because the Celtics were favored by nearly 4. I think they were favored 3.5 or 4 earlier in the week. It got bet down to 2.5 by game time. And the real opportunity was to grab the points for Oklahoma City. I didn't get there quick enough to get the 3.5, but then live bet if you felt like the Celtics were going to pull it out. That dynamic didn't come to pass because once you got to the 6-minute mark, Oklahoma City was clutch. They were clutch in the clutch, and I was very impressed by their ability to control the flow, to control the inside and the outside. They got open looks, and Boston just couldn't knock down a 3.
Would you say, Raheem, biggest X factor for Oklahoma City winning a title is Chet Holmgren?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think it's Jalen Williams. I know he didn't play today, but they're going to need a secondary scorer. I expect the defense to play well with Oklahoma City, but who's going to be the secondary guy? Who's going to be the guy who's going to pick it up for SGA when they start trapping them? Who's going to be the guys who's going to be hitting open shots? That's the X factor to me.
Interesting. But that said, House, you get a lot more games like this from Chet Holmgren. It goes a long way in helping the Oklahoma City Thunder, because that was the sort of performance that you're like, wow, makes you realize, hey, there's a reason why this guy was the top 2 pick in the draft.
They got to get that man in his hyperbaric chamber overnight for his recovery. You make sure he gets his cold plunge, make sure he gets his anti-inflammatories, put him in bubble wrap, and keep him healthy over the next 25, 30 games.
Boys, we have a lot cooking on this loaded edition of East Coast Bias. We will dive in to all of the moving and shaking, all of the wheelings and dealings that NFL free agency has brought our way. Joe House's team channeling their inner Houston Texans from a year ago. You got quarterbacks on the move. Which one excites the boys the most? What contender maybe made moves to go and close the gap with the big boys? Worried about the Eagles? There's a lot here. We have a lot to chew on. We'll dive into NFL free agency, what we like and what we didn't like, right after this. Welcome back. Obviously, in addition to all of the NBA stuff and the big one between Oklahoma City and Boston, and of course, all the college basketball that's coming your way over the next few days, the NFL has taken center stage because it's what they do. They take over the middle of March with their free agency period. So there's a lot to dive into as far as who got better, who got worse, what moves moved the needle, what moves didn't necessarily move the needle. And we are not going to bore you here with the minutia, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, of breaking down this defensive tackle went here and this offensive guard went here. We're not going to do that for you. We are going to break down, though, who we like and who we don't based upon these last few days. So, Joe House, I'll let you start the proceedings. NFL free agency, what moved the needle to you right out of the gate?
So I'm looking at two teams that were both playoff teams last year, and they both made moves that I think enhance their overall ability to either stay where they were or move a little bit forward even. And I'm looking at both the Minnesota Vikings, who I really like with their defensive tackle, the signings on the defensive line with Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. And then the offensive line, they brought in both a new right guard and a center, and they re-signed a couple of key pieces. And so the big question mark with the Vikings is what's going on at quarterback. But if it's the case that McCarthy is competent at all, I'm looking at the FanDuel Sportsbook, and I think I'm going to do something with their 21-1 odds to win the NFC. And the reason I'm looking at that is not because I think they're going to win the NFC, but because it creates an enormous hedge opportunity if they're able to run it back. Now, it's a leap of faith with McCarthy. It's a leap of faith with Kevin O'Connell. The other team that really impressed me was Denver. Denver grabbing two guys from San Francisco, key defensive guys in the form of Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga, the safety. And then they signed Evan Ingram at tight end. And we know how important tight end is in the Sean Payton offense. That guy might be a real safety blanket for Bo Nix. Those are the two teams. And Denver's available in the AFC conference for around 20-1. So I'm going to probably put a little bit on them as well. Again, not because I think they're going to win, but because I like the idea of the hedge opportunity it creates.
Okay, Raheem, I'll throw it to you. Now that we're like 2 days into this thing, House loved what he saw from Minnesota, loved what he saw from Denver. If there's a team or a move that kind of really moved the needle for you, what was it?
It's by far the Chicago Bears. First things first, you go out and you get Ben Johnson, who's the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. And then after you get Ben Johnson, you shore up the offensive line. You get Joe Thuney, you get Drew Dalman, you get Jonah Jackson to solidify the interior of the offensive line. And one of their biggest weaknesses was they couldn't block for Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams, he had a lot of bad habits. I mean, he would, drop outside of the pocket and run into sacks. You look at the Bears last year, they were 16th in pass block win rate. And you look at Caleb Williams, he had a 12.4 pressure to sack rate, which was the worst in the league. So with that offensive line getting better, you have a solid offensive coordinator. I think they've made moves to solidify themselves as one of the best teams, not only in the NFC North, but in the NFC as a whole. And they also got Montez Sweat to rush the passers. So I think this team is really live to make some noise out of the NFC.
Well, here's the problem, though, Raheem. Everything you said is factually accurate. I think it's valid. I think it's fair. And I think it's within reason. However, I have a little fear factor with Caleb Williams. I just do. After what I saw last year, and I understand you're going to say, hey, he's in a better system now. That's true. Hey, he has a better offensive line. You know what, Raheem? That's also true. I totally get it. I am concerned about his ability to function and run a play when it's not backyard football. It's a concern I have. Now, he may go out and throw 45 touchdowns this year, and it may be, hey, the talent's there, he's harnessed it, he's grown, he's ready to go. But can you understand why I, for one, and I didn't get involved with the Bears last year, full disclosure. I did not like them. I played them as an under. I did not buy the hype at all going into the year. But can you see why I have some of that
I totally agree.
PTSD? You get it?
I think his pressure to sack rate says it all. And I think if you go back to his days at USC, he picked up a lot of bad habits. basically the offensive line wasn't good and he'd run outside of the pocket and play backyard football. But in the NFL, you can't necessarily do that. So I think Ben Johnson, I have a ton of respect for Ben Johnson, and I think he's going to get rid of some of those bad habits. And I think if Chicago can actually run the ball this year, I think that can help him out. So maybe he doesn't play as much backyard football. Maybe he doesn't find himself in as many 3rd and longs this year. So I'm buying into the Chicago Bears. I like to buy into these quarterbacks still on their rookie deal. And if they go sign a wide receiver, I think that puts them, at the top of the division.
Gents, I got to weigh in here on a team that I have from a takeaway standpoint. I'm looking to sell the San Francisco 49ers. You want to talk about an exodus? This has been an absolute exodus across the board on both sides of the ball. And before you tell me, how much does Deebo Samuel have left? We'll see in Washington. But they lose Kyle Juszczyk. They lose Greenlaw. They lose Ufunga, who ends up going to Denver. They lose guys on that defensive line. Raheem, they were a team that had a lot go wrong for them a year ago. And the books priced San Francisco very steep, very, very steep as far as a team that could go and make a move forward once again, year from hell type of vibes. I have a hard time believing San Francisco now. I'm not saying they can't be a good team. I'm not saying they can't be a playoff team. But with what has transpired for them here in this offseason, they don't look like a Super Bowl caliber team out of the NFC. There's too many holes now all of a sudden, Dream.
I think you have to ask yourself if Kyle Shanahan is capable of raising the level of this offense, if Brock Purdy is capable of raising the level. Because to me, a lot of people, we looked at Brock Purdy as a guy, as a system quarterback, a guy who thrived because of the pieces around him. Now, Brock Purdy, he's gotten paid. He's there, and they lose a lot of guys like Deebo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk, and obviously Brandon Ayuk is still recovering from that ACL, MCL injury. Can Brock Purdy raise the level of his team? Because if he can't, 49ers aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, the only thing with the Bears and the 49ers that we have to start, put into the mix is, it's early, but their schedules, the 49ers, because of where they ended up in the NFC West, have a schedule where they're projected to be favored in 12 of their 17 games. And the Bears have a brutal schedule. They only have one road game, it looks like, where they're going to be favored, and that's against Vegas. So those will be elements that we'll start layering on as we get closer and closer and start seeing some win totals come out.
No question. And we know House is a king of the schedule. When the schedule comes out, he likes getting in the lab. We have a little fun with win-loss. I mean, it's a tradition unlike any other. And it just goes to show you sometimes, hey, the teams that you expect to be good and it ends up being a gauntlet at the end of the year, it's accurate. And then there are other instances where you thought maybe the Jets and Cleveland last year were going to be good teams, and they ended up being dreadful teams. So it is year to year. Speaking of that, House, last year, the Washington Commanders would have been one of those teams at the beginning of the season that you'd see them on their schedule and you'd say, wow, that's a winnable game. Ended up not being the case. Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, Peters, the whole renaissance. You make it all the way to the NFC title game. You, sir, you make the Deebo Samuel trade, and then you go and give up a whole lot to get Laramie Tunsil. I like it, because to me, you needed help on that offensive line. Tunsil wasn't as good last year. He's still one of the better tackles in the sport. He's still going to help your team. I'm getting a very Houston type of offseason from your team. And Houston last year underwhelmed us in the regular season. They won a playoff game, smoked the Chargers. We're right there with Kansas City. Could have beat Kansas City if a couple of things go differently. So where do you stand on Washington's offseason now, being a big player now with some brand names? Are you excited about this, or is this going against what you saw a year ago where it was more lunch pail-like for your team?
No, I don't think the acquisitions that Washington made undermine the lunch pail approach in any way, shape, or form. I mean, Deebo is the one that folks will point to and say, oh, will he bring it? It's a contract year for him, and it's a very low risk situation for Washington. I absolutely love the moves that they made. The Tunsil thing, you just can't say enough good things about the Washington front office, because remember, We lost Sam Cosmi on the right side of the line to an ACL tear in the playoffs against Detroit. So you have to have somebody, you have to absolutely have yourself covered on that left side so that you can work in some of the guys. We have this, a couple of young guys that might be able to move over to the right side. But if you can anchor down that left side, you still have Biadasz at center. So for Washington, like the Kinlaw acquisition for the defensive front line, like the guy Harris that they put in at safety, I think they'll continue to tinker on the defensive side. But this is a commitment to a quarterback, a recognition, just like Houston last year. We have something special. We have to protect it. We have to build around it. And I like what Washington is doing.
I think the interesting thing is, it appears that Washington got better, but the Philadelphia Eagles got worse. They lose Josh Sweat. They lose Milton Williams. You lose Isaiah Rodgers. You lose C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So the Eagles took a lot of hits. You
can throw him in the mix too, Raheem. He's got
Darius Slay as well. I think he just signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe.
That's correct.
So it just feels like maybe the NFC East is going to be tougher this year for the Philadelphia Eagles. And we all know, when you have that quarterback on a rookie deal, it's your time to capitalize. And it appears like the Washington Commanders are trying to capitalize.
Guys, I know we look at the contenders and we always want to say, hey, what did the contenders do in order to go and maybe, quote unquote, close the gap? I am very impressed, Raheem, with the moves the Buffalo Bills have made on the margins. And don't get me wrong, Joey Bosa in the regular season, you're better off putting him in bubble wrap. The guy never plays. We all know that, right? Like, he is going to play maybe 6 or 7 games. However, if you're thinking about the grand prize, which for them is what it's all about. They've been there, done that, winning the AFC East. They've won a zillion regular season games. When you're a team that's one of the 3 or 4 favorites, you're thinking about moves that maybe can help you in January. I think Joey Bosa, assuming, of course, he's healthy in January, can go and play. That's exactly the sort of guy you need to rush the passer against Mahomes or against Burrow or against Lamar or whoever it might be. And I like Palmer, the receiver they got from the Chargers. I think he's going to fit in very well with Josh Allen. He can go and stretch the field, make some big plays. They don't have a ton of cap space to work with. We know that. Raheem, I like Buffalo, what they did in these small, under-the-radar type moves. Big fan.
I think they're solid moves, but I don't know how much it truly moves the needle. Like you said, Joey Bosa is never, he's never healthy. And you could say the same about Von Miller towards the end of his career. So, obviously, as long as you got Josh Allen, you are a contender. So, ultimately, to me, Josh Allen's going to have to make that leap again, because I saw him with the ball with 3 minutes to go, down 3, and he couldn't get past midfield.
Listen, he's got to get it done, House. I know it. And I've been carrying his water the last 2 years. He's got to do it.
It is that highest leverage moment. And, there is some great data out there about he is by far the most efficient quarterback over the last, handful of years. And Buffalo has the most playoff wins of any team. They just can't get to the conference game. The interesting thing to me, the Bills feel like they're due some injury luck. They need a reversal of fortune, especially on the defensive side. They re-signed Terrell Bernard. If Matt Milano and Bernard can both play, and if they can get, 12 games out of Bosa, that defense was kind of underrated. They absolutely manhandled Denver when Denver came in, and they're schemed well. So I still like the Bills quite a bit, but the cap situation makes it hard for them to do anything but nibble around the edges.
Honestly, here's my take: the Bills aren't winning anything until they fire Sean McDermott.
Hey, listen,
that's my take.
I'm not the biggest fan of Sean McDermott. He wins regular season games. He wins the division every year. In the biggest of games, he scares you, Raheem. I'm right there with you. He scares you, and he's one of those coaches that will have that stigma attached to him until he goes and gets it done. That's just the reality of the situation. I don't think it's out of bounds. I don't think it's unreasonable. Hey, there's a different standard now in Buffalo because you've been in the playoffs and you've won a division a bunch of times over the last 5 to 6 years. Now, got to break through and get to and win a Super Bowl. Now, there are a lot of quarterbacks who are moving and shaking. What quarterback that found its way to his new home is most likely to have some success? Darnold in Seattle? Geno in Vegas. We're still waiting on what the Steelers and the Giants are going to do. Justin Fields, can he have success with the Jets? We'll dive into this because a lot of these, by the way, are the deep dives on the odds board on FanDuel Sportsbook. Not exactly finding the new quarterbacks in the 20 or 15 to 1 range. Just saying. All right, we'll come right back. Welcome back. So obviously free agency means the carousel, and you have the coaching carousel in January. March has been the quarterback carousel. You had Sam Darnold go from Minnesota to Seattle. You had Geno Smith the last Friday. In somewhat of a surprise, but when you kind of connect the dots and you see Pete Carroll and you see Tom Brady and the Raiders just looking for some semblance of credibility at the position, they go and get their guy in Geno Smith, so he goes to Vegas. Justin Fields leaves Pittsburgh and now is going to be the Jets starting quarterback. So out of any of these quarterback moves, House, Darnold, Geno, Fields, I know we're still waiting on Pittsburgh. I know we're still waiting on the Giants from a veteran perspective. Is there one that excites you maybe more than any of the others?
Only in the sense that I think that the AFC West has the potential to be a real murderer's row of a division this year. And it might finally be an opportunity to try and grab some value on a team that's other than the Chiefs to win the division. I understand how dumb that sounds, but the Chiefs, once again, didn't do anything really to improve the left side of their offensive line. And we watched Patrick Mahomes running around for his life against that four-man front that the Eagles put on the field. And, they didn't blitz. The way that both the Broncos have improved their defense and, the Chargers, we know what they're doing. I really like Geno in Vegas, though. This is a win now kind of approach, and Geno indoors has tremendous numbers. Geno's deep ball is very good. Geno gets rid of the ball quickly. I think they're going to build up, and Mr. Bowers is going to have another tremendous season. It makes that AFC West very juicy to me. I think all of those teams, it could be a repeat of what we saw out of the NFC North last year, where all these teams are jockeying, but coming close to double-digit wins.
Yeah, I think by far the best quarterback move was Geno Smith. And if you look at the Raiders, to me, Geno Smith might be the best Raiders quarterback we've seen since Rich Gannon.
Gannon. How about that? Yes.
Wow.
Because, their quarterbacks
are not great. They are not great. Unless you're a cash bar car guy, Raheem?
You're talking about Gardner Minshew. You're talking about Aiden O'Connell. You're talking about Derek Carr, who was one of the worst red zone quarterbacks of all time. Their quarterbacks have stank. You go back further than that. You're talking about Jamarcus Russell. So Geno Smith he's a league average quarterback, and you have a solid head coach in Pete Carroll. I just think it puts them in a position to where they actually can compete. So I love this move. I didn't like any of the quarterback moves. I think the worst quarterback move was Seattle trading Geno Smith and getting Sam Darnold. How does that make any sense? Sam Darnold, he will never have a season like he had last year. 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He had Kevin O'Connell, who was one of the best offensive-minded head coaches in the league. He had Justin Jefferson. And now he's going to a team with no DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. How is he going to replicate those numbers? And they paid him. That was the worst move by far.
I'm right there with you. I'm out on Darnold going to Seattle. And I know that Sam Darnold House had a tremendous feel-good renaissance season for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a big part of what they were able to do, getting all the way to week 18. He had some tremendous, tremendous games. But in the two biggest games of the year, against Detroit, basically urinated all over himself. And he was even worse against the Rams in the wild card game on Monday night. And to Raheem's point, it is a Seattle team that kind of reeks of transition, which is interesting because they go and pay Darnold a good chunk of money over the next couple of years, when in reality, House, I think they're kind of setting this thing up for being 2 or 3 years down the line. They're not going to come out and say it, but it's like they're trying to cleanse themselves from the Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, DK Metcalf regime. and Mike McDonald's trying to do it in his own way. I do not like that fit for Sam Darnold. I am out.
Well, it's a little bit of a schizophrenic approach to me with Seattle, because the thing that they need more than anything else is an offensive line. They need stability on their offensive line. They were bottom 5 offensive line all season long. They had Geno running for his life. The reason that Geno, faced the league's highest pressure rate and was getting rid of the ball under 2.5 seconds is out of necessity. He had to do that. Now, they do still have Smith and Jigba, but the problem with Darnold is we saw him excel under the absolute perfect conditions. He played a ton of indoor games. They played a schedule that was very favorable. I mean, they got fat. Now, they won the games, Minnesota, but they got fat against teams, that were bottom half of the league. And as soon as the competition ramped up, we saw what happened to Darnold. So that's my issue with it.
And then I think if you add to that, if you look at a lot of those games that Minnesota Vikings played in, they didn't play with a deficit. They played with the lead. And it's completely different when you're playing with the lead versus having to chase points. And they almost never had to chase points until the last couple of games of the season when they played the Lions or when they played the Rams. I mean, as soon as they had to chase points against the Rams, the game was over. It felt like the game was over in the second quarter. And it was just extended garbage time. So Sam Darnold's a complete fraud. I'm not buying into Bart from How High at all. If he impresses me, I'll eat my words, but I don't see it.
Raheem out on Sam Darnold and probably out on the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. Now, Joe House, my neck of the woods is New York City. The New York Jets went through the last 2 years with Aaron Rodgers, and they are very much a team in transition with Aaron Glenn and a new GM, and they go and get their bridge quarterback. And I think it's a good roll of the dice in Justin Fields. Now, let's make something clear with Justin Fields. He's super athletic. He can go and make plays with his legs, and a broken play, boom, he could hit you 50, 60 yards down the field. That second and third read has been a problem for him. Throwing from the pocket has been a problem. But I think for a retooling team, and that's clearly what the Jets are next year. They are looking to retool. They are not. They can try to say whatever they want. It's going to be a surprise if they're a playoff contender with the way they've kind of set up their roster. I think rolling the dice with a guy with upside in Fields and seeing if you can maybe strike gold is the perfect approach for a bridge quarterback. I endorse this move by the Jets wholeheartedly.
I totally agree. I love the narrative of him back in business with Garrett Wilson. See if you can build some mojo off of that. That offensive coordinator from Detroit, Tanner Engstrand, he gets a lot of credit for how prolific that Lions pass attack was. And so if you want to give Justin Fields the very best opportunity, this seems like it. They still, have weapons on the offensive side. They still made all those acquisitions on the offensive line to protect Rodgers the past couple years. I think talent-wise, the Jets should be, in a class of a team that can win 8 to 11 games or so.
Really?
I'm on the roster. Wow,
that was House, you're higher on the Jets than I am.
Well, this was they were hamstrung and their season was sabotaged, from the very outset with all the nonsense with Rodgers. And he played terrible the first 2/3 of the season. You can't sugarcoat it. He made the absolute worst mistakes at the highest leverage moments through the first 10 games of the season. The defense was not up to standard, but all of the chaos that was visited upon that situation because of the dopey ownership, and that dopey ownership is still present. So that's the thing that makes you never can do anything in terms of betting on the Jets because that dope Woody Johnson still runs them dream.
See, I don't know how I feel about this Jets team, but I do think the move for Justin Fields, it was a good one. I mean, 2 years, $40 million. I mean, that's not a lot. And he's still 26 years old. And at 26 years old, he still has potential to grow. I mean, you look at Geno Smith. A lot of people wrote him off after he left the Jets. And, he probably made the greatest resurgence since, Lil Wayne went from wobbly wobbly, drop it like it's hot, to one of the best rappers of all time. So Justin Fields at 26 years old, I think he's a great bridge quarterback, and you got a brand new head coach in there, and I think they're going to restore some order there. Now, I think the rest of the division is tough. I mean, you saw the moves that the Patriots made they brought a ton of defense in. So I don't know if there's a ton of easy wins on the Jets schedule, but I do think they should be solid, and at least better than last year. They did underperform their Pythagorean expectation. I mean, they won 5 games. They probably should have won around 7 games. So you got to expect some type of improvement.
One thing with the Jets, though, lost their right tackle in New England. Morgan Moses was one of the best offensive linemen last year. Older player, but played really, really well. They lose Adams. So right now, they do not have somebody on the other side of Garrett Wilson that is striking fear in you. And Raheem, I'm glad that you brought up New England. Now, listen, I know Simmons is probably listening and already has the Patriots going 10-7 or 11-6. I'm not willing to go that far. But I can say without hesitation, guys, the Mike Vrabel effect is real and spectacular. They are going to be so much more sound. They're going to be so much more together. They're going to have so much more talent than they've had over the last few years. That's my thing, Raheem. If I'm looking at those two teams, I think Miami's somewhere in the middle in the AFC, could go either way. I don't think the Jets are thinking, hey, 2025, we're going to be a 9 or a 10-win team. I think they're going to be more respectable, House, to your point. You're not going to have as many, loose cannons. I think the defense will be a little bit better. I don't think the Jets are setting up to be a contender in 25. I think the Patriots are more likely, Raheem, out of those two to go and make that ascend where, if you're asking me, I guess a better way to phrase it, if we're sitting here in December and who's more likely to be in the hunt to make the playoffs, I'm taking the Patriots over the Jets 100 out of 100. Does that make sense, Stream?
It definitely makes sense. The one concern I have for the Patriots is they didn't do much offensively. Who are the weapons?
So, Mac Collins, baby. The Mac man.
I mean, they improved the defense, but, there's not a ton of weapons there. So that is the one concern. But I really like Drake May, and I think they have a much better chance of being in the mix than the New York Jets.
I'm fine with giving the Patriots kudos for improving this defense, and there's no argument that Vrabel is going to help the whole situation. I just don't think they have enough talent. Their offensive line remains an abomination, and we'll see through the draft and so forth how they're able to build, but let's see by summertime. We might have to have a friendly wager on who has more wins this upcoming season, the Jets or the Patriots.
Jets, Patriots, and wow, how's higher on the Jets than I thought you would be? I have to admit. You're just happy Rodgers is gone. Now, are you now auto under next year, no matter where? Like, I made the case that I liked Rodgers in Vegas last week. Didn't happen. He ends up waiting in the wings. Carroll goes and gets a guy he's comfortable with in Geno Smith. Is the Aaron Rodgers team, whoever it is, House, an auto under bet for you in 25?
No. I honestly, what we saw out of him over the last third of the season, 4, 5, 6 games, he still has, some of that accuracy. He can't, and you would think that he would commit himself, if he's really going to come back this upcoming season, to being able to move a little bit better. As long as he's in a situation where he can't drop his nonsense and derail, locker room situation and derail with all of the diva BS that he brings with him. If he comes in and just plays football and shuts his mouth, maybe it plays like Pittsburgh, then I could see it being a decent opportunity.
Raheem, I know we're doing this before Aaron Rodgers makes his decision. I really hope he goes to the Steelers. I really do. It's the best place for him by a mile.
I hope he goes to the Steelers for multiple reasons. One, I think they're actually going to be good, but I think this creates like a final boss scenario for Mike Tomlin. I mean, you already dealt with Antonio Brown, you dealt with a ton of divas in the past, and now you got to deal with the locker room with Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and George Pickens, who we know wants to be paid. So if Mike Tomlin can handle this locker room, I mean, just stop. Just give him Coach of the Year. Put him in the Hall of Fame because he's one of the greatest coaches of all time if he can manage this.
Sign me up right now, and I'm with it. Listen, for Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. You take your pick. I'd rather have Aaron Rodgers. I saw what Russell Wilson was able to do the last 5 games of the year.
He lost his last 5 games of the year.
Bingo. I will at least take a chance that it might be different. It could be worse. It could crash and burn in epic fashion. In a way, House, that's the best thing for the Steelers if they're not a good team next year. If they're not a team that can be better than what they were over the last few years, they're almost better off having that 5 or 6 win year so they can actually get their quarterback. From that standpoint, it actually would help them, to be honest with you.
I guess. But we haven't seen in 18 years with Mike Tomlin as a head coach, them thinking about doing anything but pedal to the metal and trying to get, into the playoffs.
Boys, we got a lot more coming your way. Ringer grab bag, where I have a couple of assorted topics. There are maybe a golf player's question in there. Maybe it is a team in the Western Conference we want to start investing in that might be in that plan. Maybe it's a conference tournament. Who knows? Grab bag's coming up next. East Coast Bias grab bag time, where I give the boys a variety of different questions. They don't know what they're getting, and we'll kind of rip it from there. Joe House, let's start with you. Players this week. Very excited for it. The bet we should be making to win the players, other, of course, than Scotty Scheffler.
I'm on Ludwig Åberg this week. I absolutely adore what he's shown us. If he's in health, that's the only thing that's held that man back the past 2 seasons. He had a torn meniscus in his knee last year, and earlier this year he went through a bad bout of some kind of flu or something that impacted him in 2 different tournaments. But the players especially requires skill set that covers all of the facets of being good at golf. Good accuracy off the tee, ability to hit your irons well, great short game, and the putting, and the dude has it all. Available on the FanDuel Sportsbook at 18-1, I believe, but you're probably going to be in a live bet situation as you watch this show. Jump into the live bet odds and grab some Åberg.
Raheem, I give you the choice. Duke, Auburn, or the field?
I'm going to take the field.
I would too, Raheem.
Honestly, if you said Duke or Florida, I probably would take Duke or Florida.
Interesting. So Florida ahead of Auburn in your quote-unquote pecking order, and I get it. Florida's been awesome. They've been great down the stretch. A lot of different ways to beat you. Duke, to me, is the most complete team and the best team. There's just too much history, Raheem, of seeing a team outside of 1 or 2 go and win it. I think UConn has kind of warped that perception of us the last couple of years,
Yeah, I always say if you play the NCAA tournament over 100 times, you'll probably get 100 different results. So I'm just
the beauty of one and done, right?
Yeah, so it's very hard to just take 1 or 2 teams, and then I'm not that high on Auburn. I just like a lot of those SEC teams. The SEC is a monster, but I don't necessarily trust the offenses.
Be careful with a couple of these SEC teams because they're going to be overhyped and I think a little overvalued going to the NCAA tournament. Maybe can find some value somewhere else when the bracket comes out on Sunday night. Okay, Joe House and Raheem Palmer, this is for both of you guys. The team that currently presides a playing spot in the Western Conference, most likely to win a round, would be who?
Do I get to go first? I'll let Dream go first.
Most likely to win a round, who has a playing spot is right now, it's the Minnesota Timberwolves. But we're taping this on Wednesday. And obviously this episode is airing on Thursday morning. At that point in time, Minnesota might actually be in the 6th seed.
Okay, Joe House. I agree it's Minnesota. Would they have a better chance against Denver or Oklahoma City?
I honestly don't think it matters. I think they match up very well against both those teams. We'll see Gobert's playing, so we'll have a little bit of a reminder of Gobert's impact on the floor. But I think Minnesota is capable of beating both of those teams.
I think Minnesota's super dangerous. I'm right there with you. You got Ant-Man at the end of these games. There's a tenacity to Minnesota. They're kind of feeling their oats more with the changes they made in the offseason, obviously making the Towns trade. I think Minnesota is absolutely live to go and give one of those teams some hell. I don't know if they'd beat them, but give them some hell. We got a lot more coming your way because we saved the best for last year on East Coast Bias, the best bets. What winners do we have? Is it something in Thursday's college hoop slate? Is it an NBA play? Is it a future? Is it a golf play in addition to Mr. Ludwig? I don't know. We'll find out right after this. All right, it's best bet time. We could go a variety of different ways here. We got a bunch of college basketball, Maybe it's a future. Maybe it's some NBA. The choice is yours. Joe House, take it away, sir.
We're going out to the golf course, JJ.
Yeah, I forgot about the players. Come on, man. Shame on me.
I mean, the second best field, arguably the best field in all of professional golf till the majors come around. And I'm looking at a guy that's been off the radar. This is a little bit of a deep cut. Folks in the golf world will remember this name. Daniel Berger is available plus 240 pre-tournament to finish inside the top 20. You want to live bet him to finish inside the top 20 when you're watching this show because he will have just teed off. And look, this guy is upper echelon. He's been off the radar for a couple years because of injury, but he has 2 runner-up finishes in his last 8 starts, and he is gaining strokes, that is, against his competitors in all of the key categories, off the tee, approach, around the greens, putting. Top 20 for Daniel Berger. Live bet that for the players and enjoy your weekend.
Like the sound of that. Okay, Dream, take it away.
We're going to go with 2. We're going to go with the Los Angeles Lakers, Milwaukee Bucks, under 226. I really like this one. And then we're also going to go with a future. And this is me just taking a flyer. We all know Jalen Brunson. He has been one of the most clutch players in the NBA this season. However, he did get hurt last week against the Los Angeles Lakers, and he's going to be out a couple of weeks. Right now, he is minus 290 to win Clutch Player of the Year. I think you owe it to yourself to take a shot on Trae Young at plus 550 because Trae Young actually leads the NBA in clutch points. And those 2 weeks where the Atlanta Hawks, they're going to be playing for their playoff lives, and they're going to find themselves in a lot of close games, he might be able to run down Jalen Brunson. So let's take that future.
Wow, diving deep with Jalen Brunson maybe out for the next few for the Knicks. Guys, college basketball, I got 2 for you. They're early in the afternoon. They're the Working Man Special House, matinees. One of them at Madison Square Garden. Xavier, one of the hottest teams in the Big East. They've won like 6 of their last 7 games. Marquette limping home. Marquette is not tough. Xavier is tough. They have solved a lot of the issues they had from an offensive standpoint early in the year. I'm grabbing 2.5 with Xavier, who's going to play their way into the NCAA tournament. They need the game a lot more. I'm getting 2.5 points, and they're playing better. I'm taking the Musketeers. And then the other one, Mike Woodson, I love him. Former Knick coach, great dude. Mike Woodson against Dana Altman is a coaching mismatch in March. Dana Altman wins conference tournaments religiously. The Oregon Ducks always go deep into March. I am laying the 1.5. I'd play them on the money line if you want to be safe at around 130. Oregon will take down Indiana. I am not a believer in this Indiana team whatsoever. I know they're playing for the tournament, but I got to see it, Hoosiers. Ducks, Musketeers. That's how we're closing out East Coast Bias. For House, Raheem, JJ signing off. Good job by our guy Stefan, our guy Tucker. Everybody enjoy their Thursday. We'll be back next week. March Madness, it's in the air. Can't wait. Be good, everybody.